republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and then we'll get right into roll call. Commissioner Boyle,
Here.
Commissioner Oler,
Present.
Commissioner Johnson, excused, called in. Commissioner Murray,
Here, present.
Commissioner Zaro,
Here.
Vice Chair Whalen also called in excused, and I am Vice Chair Elliott, or sorry, Chair Elliott. Demoting myself today, apparently. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to tonight's agenda?
No.
Nope. All right. Any public participation? All right, then we will get into the approval of minutes. May 14th, there was one minor revision from the previous meeting.
So, yeah, quick comments on the minutes. So May 14th was corrected that it added other open spaces to the short plat definition. And then right before I got here, I realized that the June 11th at the top for call to order still had Vice Chair Whalen instead of Chair Elliott. So that has been corrected on my copy of the draft. So they should both hopefully be good to go.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 14th, 2025?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
All right. Motion has been made and seconded for the approval of minutes of May 14th, 2025. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 11th, 2025?
Do we need to alter them?
My copy is altered if you would like to see it.
Oh, no, it's good. I just didn't know if it was, yeah.
Nope, I brought a draft, but I
Yep.
didn't.
No,
I
that's
didn't
good.
make copies.
I make a motion to approve the Wednesday, June 11th, 2025 City of Milton Planning Commission minutes.
Second.
All right. A motion has been made and seconded. If there's no discussion, take it to vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right. Minutes for June 11th and May 15th have been approved. That takes us right into regular agenda item 6A, which is comp plan annual update items. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. So 6A and 6B are related. So we are allowed to once a year update the comprehensive plan. So we have a couple little items that staff is presenting to be part of the 2025 annual update of the comprehensive plan. The first one, or the only one for the comp plan, there's two items for the comp plan. The first would be to every year, Public Works updates their capital improvement plans for water, storm, electric, and everything. And so ideally, we would then take their updated numbers and schedule and put that into the comp plan 6-year capital improvement projects and funding sources. That ensures that we have the best chance to get grants and stuff, because they're always going to look, is it in your comp plan and is it in your other planning documents? So I will work with the Public Works Department to get those updated. My hope is to have those updates and bring this all back next month for the hearing. The second item on page 8 is that the fire department has been slowly buying property because they are going to build a fire station within the city of Milton. We had talked about making this change last year, but they weren't sure yet which property. They were still looking at buying properties. They weren't sure if they were going to try to do a joint facility with the city, and so we sort of held off. They are for sure going to build at this location, and they did purchase some additional property. So in order for them to actually be allowed by comp plan and zoning, we do need to change both of those. So the map on page 8 shows what would become community facilities. So that is what is included in the comprehensive plan update. Um, and so if there was anything else that the planning commission had, I also figure I'll go through, not that we necessarily have to do a formal approval of it, but I will do, I think there's been a few little like typos and different things that we've identified. So I'll try to do an update of all that too, if there's anything. But if you happen to see something in the next week or two that you feel like might be either a correction or something you feel like, hey, this, we needed a policy that we missed or something, or that could be brought back. Again, we can do it once a year, but we can only do it once a year outside of like an emergency situation for utilities or something.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's any discussion on that. I'll leave that. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, great. So yeah, I guess I'll open it up for discussion. Anyone have any comments or?
Question.
Go for it.
Is this blue highlighted section, is that all they'll be purchasing, or do you think we'll have to do this again?
This is supposed to be all that they are purchasing.
Okay.
We've had a pre-application meeting with them that they have a design. It will look like all their other stations, except they are looking at, this is extra knowledge, but they are hoping to actually also have a training facility on the back end. Since this one, they'll have a little more room. And so this should be, it's kind of why we were holding off. This should be all that they're purchasing.
For future, is there any process improvements that you would see as far as allowing them to purchase properties that are outside of that zone so that we don't have to do the community facilities adjustment when I don't want to do something, or if there's a way we can make that process easier for a fire department, school, community use, that like
So
they're
the-
allowed to build in these zones, but
So the alternative would be, so if you didn't, so the challenge with the comprehensive plan is that you can only change it once a year. Zoning, you can change more often. So the alternative would be if in the zoning code, we allowed fire stations or emergency service stations or schools in those zones. So if they were allowed in a residential zone or allowed in a commercial zone, then we wouldn't have to change.
the zone allowed in order for them to build.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, and I did sort of like go through what is the easiest, best alternative in this case. All of our others, though, are labeled, all the city property, the schools, they're all community facilities. So it seemed like that was more what we've done historically.
Okay.
So I have a kind of question. This is directly adjacent and actually part of the building that Cannon Electric is occupying. Is that right?
It's the property next to it,
Okay, so they don't share a wall. It just appears to.
just property lines.
Okay.
So the property that's the Cannon Electric, their parking lot is behind their building. Then there's the property line, and then there's this property.
Okay.
And
Commissioner Boyle, do you have a question?
Thank you. Is this normal that somebody would come in and buy a bunch of land and then I guess they would request the zoning? They're doing it the right way. Do you ever get where it's like they're rolling the dice where people could be like, no way, well, I mean, think about it. A lot of people, I look at having a fire station nearby as a positive. Yet my daughter lives in downtown Puyallup and the fire trucks are going by constantly. Some people would think maybe that is a negative. And so I was wondering if the fire department is kind of rolling the dice a little bit. I guess they are, but it's.
they are.
Yeah.
I assume they were taking into account that their understanding is that the city council wants a fire station, and they have been, these properties, I think the majority of these properties they've owned for,
Oh,
I think,
years.
yeah,
They just
multiple
bought up some of the
years.
ones on 11.
They just sort of bought a few more. So yeah, there is a little bit of, okay, but I hope everyone supports this.
Yeah, I was just thinking, cart before the horse, but, yeah, no, and the other question I had is this something that we kind of want to rush into, or do we save this 6-month period coming up for any other changes that might come along for, I mean, you can't see in the future, but I see you've got a couple items on here, but
Yeah, so for for private applications, if if a developer was looking at it or there, our window for that is between, I think, yeah, it's like end of January through March. And so that window is closed. So anything that came in now, we would just say, okay, it'll be part of next year's. This one, because it's one that we've been talking with the fire department for, I felt like we'd already, as a city, intake, did an intake, and it's community facilities and stuff. I will, again, it's hard, I will add the second piece of this, which is item 6B, is the zoning part of that. So again, we'll need to change the zoning, just to kind of give you the idea of what my thinking is. There is, again, change it to community facilities. It would be, we need to add it to the use table because it doesn't cleanly say fire department or, but my suggestion will be that we do it as a conditional use permit because obviously that allows, it's a much higher level of review, and that allows the neighborhood meeting and the public hearing, and it allows us to do conditions because it is going to affect that neighborhood differently than most objects. So that's the second half of this, is that, yes, my recommendation is that we change the comp plan map, we change the zoning map to the right zone, but we allow it with the conditional use permit process, which is that higher level.
last question. Is our 2025 comp plan complete and been sent to the state and been sent back? And
Yeah, so technically, even though we adopted in January 2025, it's the 2024. Yes, we actually just got, so I apologize. I should have sent that to you guys. We sent it to council, but I should have sent it to Pierce County. Sorry, should have sent it to the Planning Commission. The Puget Sound Regional Council did do their approval of it, which is usually the hardest, because they're looking at it for, does the traffic and do you agree with the other cities and stuff. So we did get our certification from the Puget Sound Regional Council. It's been submitted to the state. And yeah, they've taken it. So yeah, so we did great.
thank you.
I'm so torn because on the one hand, who doesn't want better fire facilities in the town of Milton, updated ones? That's great. The only thing that kind of pains me is that this is kind of another step away from what we hoped this area would be, which was like kind of a little neighborhoody kernel for Milton where people could live, work, hang out, have coffee, maybe go shopping kind of thing, that little neighborhood feel. It's kind of another step away from that with the business right there and then the fire station. But on the other hand, I'm not anti-fire station. It's just, this is kind of hard for me to wrap my head around for that reason alone. It's kind of a pity that we don't have, now we'll have Meridian and kind of down here by Triangle Park. It's like another chunk away from that
Yeah, it'd be
restaurant, community meeting space, meet your friends, have coffee feel. That's my only, it's kind of a big thing that's holding me back.
You would have liked it to have been located someplace else.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say that I think this gives good measures for like with the conditional use permit, where maybe we start looking into more of a roundabout there for traffic calming and that, because it's kind of a blind corner, especially if now you've got fire trucks pulling out. But I've been to a lot of like small town events where then the fire department's out, they're able to roll up their doors and have kids, and then it becomes that much more of a continuation of the park right there too. So it gets people kind of traversing up and down when we have Milton Days or something like that. They're rolling up the doors. Be nice if we could get a little extra parking for some of those events or something like that too. And then with our design standards, we can start looking into or making some of those requests on how we might like that to look and feel and maybe set the tone for, we're kind of playing that Old Town vibe last meeting. I know it's kind of a hoping to get visioning and that they're on board because things aren't quite in place yet. But I do think that there'd be some fun opportunities for like branding this zone, if that makes sense.
So the plan would be to hold the public hearing at the next meeting,
Okay.
assuming that I get all of the stuff I need for the 6-year TIP
Okay.
for both the transportation, all those. And then if everyone's comfortable, we could vote on it next month. If for some reason it needs, there's always that option to push it off, but that would be my idea, is to have the public hearing and then it would go to council for final.
Yeah. I'm in favor of a public hearing next month, just so that it's one step further in the process. That doesn't mean we have to take it to council that very meeting, but is checking for consensus, is that okay with everyone? Yes. Commissioner
I
Brown?
was hoping to get input. Commissioner Roller brought up a good point about, there's different ways to look at this property, and obviously the fire department's already bought it. But I would like to hear from other two commissioners and possibly the public hearing before. I'd hope people come out and let us know what they think, because it's kind of one of those things where I'm, hey, somebody bought the property, they intend to do this. Shouldn't necessarily stop them, especially when it's a public service. And you're right, we don't even, technically we have a fire station here, but it's really all we have in the city of Milton. So that would be my deal. And then the other thing is, don't we normally, I always suggest that we skip the August meeting because it's 3 days before Milton Days, but if we have to work, we have to work. So that's.
We were kind
I
of
just bring-
discussing before the meeting that,
Just bringing it up. It's not, I'll be here if you say I have to be here.
We were discussing maybe, we think it's October's when there's the
craft bazaar
where
that
we were
we.
going to have to move the meeting because of the craft bazaar, so that might be a good month to take a break. But do you need prep time before Mountain Days?
Get manscaped.
Whiskey and honey's my secret.
We'll make sure to discuss what meetings towards the very end. But as far as whatever date our next meeting is, I think it's always nice to get the public hearing out so that people have the opportunity to provide some input, and then we still are meeting our timeline to have further discussion or include them. I think another thing to discuss is now this leaves like that one little red tail just below the community facilities, and just if that still makes sense or what that property is. So we may want to drive by there and see if we
Which,
take that off or if we.
Yeah, is that a driveway?
looking at
So there's one property that's just south of the new blue,
this yellow one back here?
this one red parcel.
Oh, the red parcel, okay.
Yeah, there's one red parcel.
Like that?
Just
Yeah,
south.
that one, and then there's a driveway coming this way. I think that's a driveway anyway.
Yeah. So we may just want to drive by and peek at that and see if it makes sense to tweak that.
One of those properties was for sale recently, but I think it might be a couple lots down, and it was like an access road that went back, and it's that older red house back there.
Okay. It's an easement to that house, okay.
I think it's a couple houses down, though, south of that red one.
Okay.
All right. Well, there's not really a lot of action on that one, so I think checking aerial maps and just,
Do you want me to go to 6B?
yes, please.
Okay, so again, 6B, obviously, as I previously said, part of that, so technically zoning code, you can do multiple times a year. It is, my history is usually to do sort of if you're doing a comp plan update, a lot of times maybe there's a companion zoning update that's more just some smaller miscellaneous things, kind of as an annual thing versus like, when we do all of the parking or all, other things, it was like a whole big chunk. This is more like if there's a few things that aren't necessarily changing the policy or the mindset, it's more correcting or clarifying. That's my suggestion to do sort of what I call the annual zoning update as well. So just a couple little things that, so again, adding the fire facilities as a conditional use permit under, so I'm going to do number 2 real quick, under community facilities on page 9. And then, for some, again, these are things that I'm thinking, I don't know if that was what the thinking was at the time, but, if vehicle repair, business, again, I mean, we're going to hopefully have a sub area plan in the business area, but we allow a lot of other similar things. And it seems odd that vehicle repair wasn't included in that. So we can look at that and see if that should be added back in just for the business area. We do allow auto sales, and a lot of times auto sales and auto repair kind of go hand in hand. So that was one that, again, just came out as I have people talk to me. Jumping back up to number 1, again, this is just a clarification as people are starting to look at what an accessory dwelling unit is. They're starting to ask questions. There's sort of this, okay, what's the difference between an accessory dwelling unit and a tiny home? Well, tiny homes, again, are a term that could be an ADU if it's a permanent structure on a permanent foundation. But tiny homes can also just be rolling RVs that look more like a home, that are the box shape. And so, having had this discussion a little bit with people and trying myself, I felt like if we want to just add in the definition, the idea, so that a current definition means a smaller independent residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a principal unit. My suggestion is the part in red is just say, and meets all of the codes of a permanent structure, because that's the idea, is that it's a permanent thing that meets the permanent code. And then 3, again, something that just sort of came up as I'm trying to enforce things and I get questions, is when we talked about temporary signs, we said that temporary signs on private property if they're saying the same thing, have to be 100 feet apart. But we actually didn't say that for the portion that's in the right of way. And it seems like our intent was probably the same idea, that if you're saying the same thing, you should be spread out.
Okay.
Now, I think I said along the same property line. So like, if the lots are only 75 feet wide, then each property can have a sign. But you can't put 5 signs. Not this election, but the last election. I know there were some ones on 99 where somebody put like 20 signs in front of one vacant property. And I was like, oh, it doesn't really say that I can make them spread it out. So those are just 2 small little corrections that I thought would help make my job easier. And then obviously, again, changing the actual physical map. So those are my only things for like the annual zoning update that would just go along with the map update. So again, if there's anything that you happen to see clean up, but I would bring it back with the same idea as a second public hearing and then go from there.
Okay, great. So this is really just informational. Is there any
Yeah, unless
discussion
there's
for
any
it?
comments, that's just saying and if you disagree with any of that offhand or have questions on that, but that's just what again, those are the only things I see that I don't think that changes the intent. I think it just helps me administer the intent a little better.
Okay. Just throwing out there, are there any other items that people have noticed since our last update? Okay. Perfect. All right, and then just if you guys peruse through, please make sure to just give staff any comments over
Yeah,
the
if you
next couple weeks.
Think of something or you have questions, obviously I'm
Okay, cool.
And then, so 6C, so last month, the planning commission kind of started talking about the idea of design standards in our various districts. The direction I came away from was to sort of start by focusing on commercial type buildings, which includes the mixed use and then multifamily. So what I have tonight is simply I took what we currently have in our uptown design for commercial. So I just took the commercial mixed use end and I'm not dealing with the multifamily yet. But what I tried to do is sort of just chunk out each section, highlighting what the intent of that section is. So again, starting on 13, for pedestrian walkways, the intent is to implement the vision and comprehensive plan policies with the precisions of a district-wide integrated walking system. And then it also had the idea of making through block connections. So my lovely little picture says when you don't give nice little pedestrian, people make their own. And then the second half is again, these are, unless it's in red, if it's in blue, it's coming from our current document that just applies to Meridian and kind of comes in to about Uptown Coffee. This sort of governs that area. So the question is, this is the great base to start with that we can use for the rest of the commercial areas we have, or maybe even the industrial areas, mixed use areas. And then each one of these has like subsets of actual specific, it shall be this high or this wide, or you can use this type of window or that kind of window. So I left those out, kind of focusing more on sort of a little bit more of the higher levels. So this seemed like the best way to start is just, hopefully everyone had a chance maybe to look through it. Maybe after we talk about it, you think about it through the next does this make sense to use this for the other areas? Is there anything we want to expand, or do you feel like any of this is just too much? Like this is just overkill? And so I'll just kind of zip through real quick. Like I said, I made a few comments in red. Obviously, when it comes to pedestrian walkways, I'll review. Right now, we have specific numbers of how wide it has to be and how this and that. I'll make sure that we're doing whatever's current, and it's probably 5 feet usually, but sometimes 7 makes sense. So I didn't put those in specifically, but obviously they would have that. And then I kind of made we don't really have a purpose in that section. So again, on page 12, I kind of gave an idea of maybe what the purpose could be. So applicability, again, on page 12, backing up just a smidge, is like I said, right now, this is for in uptown zones. So the idea would be would we want it to be then an uptown, anything that's the commercial mixed use, and then multifamily would have its own similar set. And so for applicability, right now, we do it for new buildings. If they're adding on, basically the floor area is getting bigger. If they're reconfiguring a parking lot, aside from simply putting in something like a required ADA, or if they're remodeling 25% or more of the facade area. So I know one of the things that Commissioner Whalen has thought about and asked us to consider is, would there ever be, so what if they are just 100% remodeling on the inside? Is there a threshold that would require them to update the outside? So right now, they only have to do the outside as if they're doing the facade or they're doing the parking lot. Some of the idea being is like, if you look at the Safeway complex, there is no internal sidewalks unless they're putting in a new building. So is there something that would trigger, if Safeway's totally redoing everything, would we trigger them? Is there something like we say, okay, you know what, within 10 years, you need to put in there are things you can do like that. You can say, hey, this is the new standard. Most of the time you don't retroactive, but sometimes you do, and you give them a timeline. You say, okay, within 10 years, we want you to have some sort of internal sidewalk thing. So those are some things to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. So I'm thinking about that. We're talking about sidewalks along the driveways because there really aren't right now. So like if you were to walk there, you're walking along a sidewalk until you get to the driveway, and then you're walking with people who are really intent on moving in and out of that parking lot. So we're talking about sidewalks like that, correct?
Yeah.
safe travel from
there-
your parking spots to your,
Yeah, so from the actual right-of-way sidewalks to the buildings, maybe the buildings to some of the parking spots. And there are ways that that can be done, which some of the things you'll see is it doesn't always necessarily mean building sidewalks. It could be simply changing the color of certain things, making it so that there's some pedestrian awareness. So that is one thing. I know that we've had discussions on staff, public works, of is there ways that we could force those sort of strip mall commercial areas that have been there a long, long time
To
sort
upgrade.
of upgrade some of those pedestrian things just for safety. And
Yeah.
more and more people are riding bikes, more and more people are walking. As we build the sidewalk systems within the whole city, that's going to allow that. So that can be something we can think on.
I'm for anything that forces them to do the right thing.
Is there a map anywhere in the city? Sorry if I stepped on
no,
toes.
go for it.
A map somewhere that someone has of the sidewalks and currently in the city with the,
Yes, our comprehensive plan has a map of the sidewalks.
In the traffic section.
But I can get one specifically, sent one out for everybody.
yeah, I'll just, for reference is all. Nothing urgent.
So then, again, just kind of zipping through this.
Before you zip
Yep.
even further,
So,
let's make sure everyone has a chance.
We were kind of talking about, updating sidewalks and bikeability. Is there a way or an area section to include like mandatory bike locking stations for businesses that are in these kind of commercial buildings, thinking of like the Safeway? I know we talked at, I think it was a city council meeting or something years ago about with the new public library there having, they have a bike lock, but it was in the back side of the building. And it's like, that's not,
Not
peop-
accessible.
is not as accessible in the back or noticeable that it's back there. People are coming to the front side with all the other businesses. Is there a way, like, if you have X amount of parking spots, you need 3 places to park a bike or something? Is there a section that we could maybe look at?
So, yeah, so design is the perfect section for that, what we're doing now. We did last year when the Planning Commission updated our site plan requirements, review requirements, we sort of threw in you have to consider bike with at least a placeholder to make them start thinking about that. But there's nothing real specific of what that means. So yes, this would be the place and the opportunity to think through do we want a specific, like I said, for every so many parking spaces, you have to do so many.
Right.
If depending on what time of business, this is the type of bike, is it just the little tie your thing to it or an actual like locker or, yes. So those are definitely things that we can look into more.
Okay, I know it's something we've brought up with the park redesign right now. Currently, is do we have a mandatory bike lock in all of our parks as well? So just trying to incorporate that with our city use to really just kind of push people
Yeah.
to encourage them, I should say.
And to confirm, are you talking about the bike lockers or are you talking about bike racks?
But just a bike, simple, like the little
the
like,
loops.
loops,
Okay.
bike locks, just something to kind of
Okay.
park a bike, lock it up with a chain
Okay.
or a U-lock.
Okay,
Not a
perfect.
locker, yeah, not
Okay,
necessarily
the
a
bike
locker.
lockers, Tacoma, they put something in and then it turned into a whole deal as far as, because they said
People
bike
using-
lockers. Yeah, that people, then you had egress issues as far as people being able to lock themselves into them or lock others into them and.
No,
if you
my
lo-
brain is
yeah.
just going to like the little.
Okay, yep,
loop-de-loop
okay.
things.
I mean, those
That,
only
or
make
they're
sense at
just
a place
really
like a
expensive.
Tacoma
So
Dome
it's cost
Station
prohibitive
anyway.
For
Yeah.
developers.
But I love that idea. Yeah, totally down.
Okay, so yeah, it's like all
And I
for
appreciate
bike
your
racks.
Right, loop-de-loop.
conscious of where, because I mean, not to throw out my personal stories, but my daughter who does not drive and has an e-bike, one of a store that she locked it up, it got stolen from. And I think a huge part of it is here's the entrance, here's the bicycle locks. And they're, technically it's in the front, but it's not where the traffic is. And so I think it was really easy for someone to pull up with a truck, go click, 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 toss in and go. So you do have to think through where they go to make them safe as well.
Yeah, and I
So-
think that was with the library was, I think it was Councilmember Cedar brought it up because the bike one is in the
In the
back side of
back,
the
yeah.
building. And it's just not a
which
high
was a
traffic
great
area.
it's space for it, but it's
Absolutely.
not practical.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great addition. Any other comments so far? Yeah.
Question real quick, you might get to this, but as I was looking over it, there's a few instances, for example, on page 19, number 4, the last sentence is roof-mounted screening techniques include but are not limited to, and then there's 2 pictures of dumpsters.
So yeah, that's where I said there's a lot of these where there is another subsection of A, B, C, Ds, and E that I left out.
Okay,
So,
okay.
you know, so it would have had like, you know, it's listing specific types that you could use, specific examples. The dumpsters are just letting you know, like, here's one that does well when you're screening all of your dumpsters, and here's one that does not screen well. So, yeah.
Right.
Um,
Okay, that answers a lot of my confusion then. Thank you.
so just sort of, again, kind of, and please, yeah, either stop me or I can stop every so often and see, on page 14, it talks about, stair design, which again, we talked about that if you don't put, you know, if you have a mall that, or maybe you have, you know, a mall here and some commercial stuff here, but you have no connections, if it's up a hill or if it's just flat, people will make trails, so you should think ahead. So it talks about stairs, which makes sense because stairs are the direct path. I was thinking if it should somehow be updated to using a pathway whenever possible, because anybody can use a path, not everyone can use stairs. And that's not anymore. It's not just ADA, it's also strollers and stuff. So I was thinking maybe, you know, adding some wording of at least, again, we can do that fine line of you need to somehow meet the intent, but maybe you have to at least consider and demonstrate if you can't use a path, why, even though it may take you a little bit longer or something, or at least contemplate both. I mean, the zoo, that's the picture from the zoo. They do a great job of stairs and pathways. And now with wagons are big.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I recognize those stairs though.
Yeah, I tried to take stuff, a lot of these from places I've been or I like. Again, slope treatment, just the idea that instead of having a solid wall, you make them put in something. Bridge did this to an extent. It's not, you know, it's still pretty large, but they did break it up a little bit. Public spaces and plazas. Again, these are all things we've done. This is actually in Walla Walla. I'm pretty sure one of these spaces I used to eat my lunch at when I worked in Walla Walla. It was really nice to just kind of go a couple blocks and be able to sit outside. I didn't get the pictures in time for this, but both Bigfoot Java and, interestingly enough, the car wash have really nice little plaza kind of things. The formerly other coffee shop
Drive a pizza.
that's going to eventually be a pizza, which is getting closer. It's not quite as nice, but it does have a little bit there too. So again, are we wanting those? Is there any improvements to those? That kind of thing. Obviously, it's, you know, talks about if you're doing site furnishings, that kind of thing.
So quick pause. Any
Yep.
questions about stairs or slope treatments or kind of accessibility? Comments on that?
Not necessarily, but like with the slope treatments, how just with the pictures, I just love how it's incorporating vegetation, trees. If that's something that to either include in this section, or I know we talked about it at last meeting, really going into like a landscape heavy kind of section of trees and parking lots, having little islands and things like that. So, you know, just seeing that picture there made me think of bringing that back into that conversation of, you know, if you have slopes, is it just dirt versus something else there?
It does feel like it might be worth rolling in a lot of the landscaping taking it out of our landscaping section and rolling it into the design. And maybe the landscaping section is more about tree retention and different things. Because a lot of this, yeah, there's a lot of this about buffers and trees and plants and stuff.
Yeah,
So.
like when we're talking about the public space and plaza, it's like, do we have X number of trees per square feet? Or, I think there's just a lot of room to kind of incorporate and add in a landscaping feel to bring
Mhm.
vegetation, earth, trees, even just dirt, so it's not concrete.
Mhm.
But I think there's just a lot of room that we can add a bullet point in a lot of these different sections to bring that in, tie it together.
Perfect.
Love it.
Yeah, and then moving into public spaces, plazas, or site furnishings. Any comments or questions?
I have a general question about language. Do you find that the use of the word should and encouraging them to do something actually encourages them to do it?
So what we discussed last month, which I think,
I was not.
yeah. So which I could have included that sheet. So yes, somewhere in here will be language that says the shall, must is they have to.
Yes, I think I saw it.
Yeah. So the idea would be for these is that intent would be that you have to create, like for public spaces, you have to create usable, accessible, and inviting public open space pedestrians. So someone here will say the intents are shalls and musts. And then the standards will be kind of like they could be shall or they might be some shoulds of you should do something like this. And so if they say, well, I don't really want to put site lighting, we'll be like, okay, but what are you doing that still meets the intent of having a safe, usable space? So it's that balance of trying to say being prescriptive, but not too prescriptive, like leaving some flexibility.
So
Now,
it's basically like you must provide a comfortable and usable public space. And then these are ways that you can obtain it.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the way this is written is the standards are shalls. And then, like I said, there's sort of a subsection that I left out that is more you can choose these options or you can get the planning director or whoever's in that role to sort of okay that. So we could leave these as shalls, which we may want to, like I said, site lighting, we might be like, no, you're going to have to light.
That verbiage is on page 11. It's the third bulletin. The should may encourage. Encourage our suggestions. Shall, will, must are mandatory.
Yep.
A way to provide flexibility is to make the objective a shall, but examples are a should.
So yeah, there's how we write that does make a difference.
Right. Okay. As long as the intent is a shall, I could just see if we say, oh, you should add trees, that's not happening.
Exactly. And people have found those loopholes
Mhm.
over the years. And that's where you get to like standards are you have to, guidelines are, well, we'd like you to.
Okay.
So the next 2 pages are just, again, site lighting, building location, parking lot location. Again, these are all dealing with sort of on the property where it is. The lighting is, the idea is that it needs to, if you have lighting, it needs to be for safety. You need to keep it down, not glaring on your neighbors, not glaring up. The location and the parking lot location are, I think, something we've had is, again, the tendency with planners is to sort of be like, hey, put the building up front, put the parking in the back. On the next page, on 18, I've got some pictures of that. I know that there's been discussion. I know sometimes businesses are like, but we don't want parking in the back. We want parking in the front. So here's right across the street in Edgewood, one where obviously it's the newer, so the learning experience has that building up front and their parking's on the side. So again, it sort of has that, oh, that's what's there. Those are the buildings. And then the second one is what's right next door is like, it's that pushed in the back where all that parking's in front. And then the bottom one is sort of that overview with Meridian Avenue at the bottom of the page, the idea that the experience learning is shoved up, the auto is in the back. So again, maybe thinking through, is that's what this plan says is everything should be up front, and that's kind of what we've lent to, is there, you know, there's some real advantages to that. I also know that like Meridian's not like, people aren't gonna like stop in front of it and go in because it's a busy street. So is there ways where maybe, again, maybe parking on the side is better than parking on the back in certain aspects? So you're getting the building not way back there because you can still see what's there, but so anyway, just thinking through what our current thing is, what those trends are, and are we comfortable with that, or do we want something in between?
Yeah, if you look at the O'Reilly building, it appears that these two lots, kind of scaling it with my pen, but it looks like the two lots are the same. It's just the way the building's built, it's skinnier and longer. Whereas if the O'Reillys, they could have easily have done that, made it skinnier and longer, and then had the entrances on the left-hand side with the parking.
And I do get the whole, if it's truly not a pedestrian friendly area, having the building up front and parking in the back, then where's your entrance? And it does get a little confusing. I know there's some places in Federal Way on their busy street that sometimes you're like, I don't know how, I mean, so.
So I have two comments on this. I think one, to me, it depends on the type of business as well. If it's a child learning center, having it on the sidewalk, that's not, you're not promoting someone to like walk in and like, oh, let's stop inside this store. But if you have a store like a Christie's Corner or something with the knitting store, where you're encouraging people, like, we want the business to come in, having that more on a sidewalk facing versus less so for a learning center where you're not bringing people in to attract the customer, if that would play a part into it. And then the second thing I know with like the apartments that went into Meridian, they were right up against the sidewalk, and now Edgewood is struggling to, they can't expand to make it 2 lanes in a middle in certain areas because now you have a building right up against it. So is there like in here, there's like the grass on that picture. Is there like a built-in safety net on either side to, what if Milton does need a second, Milton Way needs a turning lane on the way down or 2 lanes down, or what does years down the road look like for Milton Way if we have businesses right up against it? We're locking ourselves into that road structure. So that would just be another thing that my brain's going to for those two.
For me, I think safe access from the right-of-way to the building's storefront is important. To me, it's not a priority for the storefronts to be on the sidewalk because of reasons I've said before, that sometimes I feel like it might be more of a trend right now. I don't know if that's going to be something long-term that's beneficial, and I don't want to get us locked into this. You know, that I've been to restaurants where it's because they're told that they have to put everything forward to the sidewalk, you're now almost like walking around the building in the parking lot to get to it. So I would prefer to leave it up to the business to determine where they'd want to place their building within their lot lines. As granted that they provide safe access, lighting and such. I'm not a huge fan of mandating that it has to be on the right of way in my case, but I'm open to.
I don't think it's that. I think it's getting the parking in the rear. It's not so much that it's shoved up for pedestrian access. It's to get the parking in the back. So if your building's shoved up against the road, you're forced to have your parking in the back. Same thing with how we configure our drive-throughs. It's the same policy. It's to get people driving around the back and then out from the sides. And I think that was the intent when we were talking with these uptown standards before, was getting the buildings up close to the road. And, pedestrian access, but you look at Uptown Coffee and do they have an entrance on the street?
Yeah, they blocked it
Yeah,
off.
but don't they
too, but
lock
they don't
it
wanna be-
or?
Right.
Yeah.
See, and so
Yeah.
you're right. It's not so much for pedestrian access, it's to get the parking in the back of the building.
Yeah.
And trying to put on, yeah, not just my planner hat that I go to the planner meetings for,
Yeah.
but I could see what we want for sort of our, downtown central area to almost be more that way. Because I think our hope is those things that are those neighborhood commercial areas, those areas that are more up in this area, there's a higher potential of people walking to them.
Mhm.
But I do struggle with if you're on Meridian, if you're on Milton Way,
Or 99 or,
yes,
yeah.
definitely when you get onto that side.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much, you're less of people just, oh, I'm going to walk down.
Look
Yeah.
at the planning for the Edgewood area up there where the windmill is now. And that whole stretch, that guy came in here and gave us that presentation and everything's right up against the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So is it, and yet having the buildings way in the back, all you ever feel like is this giant parking lot. So maybe there's some happy mediums of some parking, or like you said, the parking on the side. I don't know, just, I
There
think
can be
it's, we're open to
flexibility.
think about it.
Because the front of the building, it attracts the customer. I know what this building is. I can park here, and if I can't find parking, I'll keep going around maybe that little grocery store and park. I mean, I don't feel like their parking's really a problem. That was kind of a choice of theirs at O'Reilly, is my feeling. And then there are some wacky things, like if I walk a lot, walking down Triangle Park by Dave's, and then you go to walk by Cannon Electric, that is the most awkward, weird place to walk because there's no sidewalk. There's no continuous sidewalk. Once you come away from Dave's and you're headed downhill, you kind of hit a parking space and like a little median that's full of plantings, and there's no sidewalk there, but there's a sidewalk all the way around Cannon Electric. It's really weird. Walk that way sometime, and if you haven't, and see what I'm talking about. So any way that we could like have a continuous sidewalk down that road would be, with our design standards in the future, I know it's too late for them, that would be good.
Yeah.
But right now, that is super weird. Has anybody else walked that? It's
Yeah, I've parked over.
odd.
Yeah. Trying to cross
So
the street.
related to that, if you want to just flip the page on
Yeah.
20, is that idea of, it talks about corner features. And so I used Emish Market. So again, the idea is that they put it up close. Now they do have some like outdoor seating right at the corner, which is, their bubbles are kind of cool. I haven't sat in one yet, but I've sat outside when it was summertime and it was kind of nice. But the idea that, compared to like the Walgreens, where again, here's this great corner of your city and you're just kind of seeing parking lots and fences where, oh, wow, you could see a structure. So there is this idea of corner features. Now, it doesn't have to be intersections. It could be within the strip mall, you kind of add that extra kind of look to those corner features. But it doesn't, but then does it have to be the building? And that's where, again, thinking of conversations we've had, thinking of the conversations of like, we are starting to have conversations, fingers crossed, for Hollywood Video, is for them, they're like, we really don't want to put a building in that corner. But we have talked about, well, but maybe we can do some sort of, that could be where their plaza is, their public space is. So it's something that looks nice as you're entering Milton, but maybe it isn't the building crammed right up front. So that's some things to think about too, is are those alternatives acceptable for those kind of
Yeah.
things?
Yeah. In my mind, thinking of development, I think the more options and freedoms that meet the intent, but give the developers, I just get a little worried that we get so restrictive that people don't want to invest in here. So that's where I get sometimes. So if we say we want to create some sort of visual presence at the corners, I'm okay with that. I just don't think it needs to be the building. How do others feel?
I can see that. Yeah. I think we could be limiting our the businesses coming in if we're so restrictive on building has to be here, has to be this, has to be. I think presenting options of it, but I see both sides. I see like you don't want to drive down and just see parking lots all the way down the street, and you got to squint like, oh, what's that building? What's that building? But yeah,
So 20 and 21, like I said, it sort of talks about that corner feature. It also talks about blank walls, picking on Sherwin-Williams a little bit. I mean, their front of their building's kind of fun. It is set back, but their side is just, I mean, it does have one little stripe down it. But again, it's on the street. So the idea is if they had to follow these guidelines, they would have had to put in just a few more things. Maybe it's a trellis with plants growing up. Maybe it's some windows. Maybe it's some cover, something to just make it a little more interesting, since it's right along the street.
How come they didn't do more trees on that blank wall? They just have one at each end.
Yeah.
You don't know?
They got those beautiful scuppers.
And I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the pictures and examples because
yes,
just being a strange lady taking a picture of buildings around the city must have been quite a sight.
They were scared. They're like, oh my God, it's the planning commission.
Oh,
Google. So
you're not out there. You're not out there with your phone and
It
stuff.
depends. I had to do like the car wash. That's why they're not in here. Is I did do the car wash, but because it's not on Google yet. So
Yeah, O'Reilly's is calling the daycare next door. Hey, is there a lady over taking pictures of your building too?
Because I was in my personal car taking a compliance picture once, and I got called in. Why is this person taking a picture? And then the bottom of 21. So, franchise design and visible facades. The idea is that, you know, there's certain buildings like you're like, okay, that is a Taco Bell or that is a McDonald's historically. And so what happens, you know, you've seen them where you're like, oh, now it's a coffee shop, but man, it was a something because their design of that building is so tied to that. So the section basically says you can't use any stock building plans. The problem with that is that nowadays, most of these buildings, their stock plans are more neutral. And so I don't like that term of stock. That was like Gravity Coffee. That was their stock building plans. It's a perfectly nice square building with nice look that, yeah, you can tell by the coloring it's Gravity Coffee, but it could be easily converted to something else. So my idea is that I kind of grabbed some looking at what like Chelan had done is just maybe tweak that language to just say that, you know, it has to be able to be, and it didn't really have an intent. So I thought, well, if we add an intent that basically says it has to be adaptable. You can't make it so your company, like Sherry's, you know, Sherry's when you see it, even though they're no longer here, and it makes me very sad.
Pizza Hut roof and
Yes,
stuff.
you
yeah.
know, so
yeah,
just, they're not,
you can always see that.
with the idea that they probably aren't going to be here forever, they need to somewhat be whatever. Is there any questions on those two pages?
No, I think like another good example is like the Taco Bell that we have in Milton versus like the one down in Fife.
Yeah.
Ours is very more neutral. Any other restaurant could just plug in there. The one down in Fife has been there for forever. That one has like you were saying, like a stock Taco Bell feel to it.
Yeah.
No, definitely agree.
And then again, this is what's currently in the code is this idea of making them have visible building entrances, ground floor facades. The transparency is the idea of windows, which our current windows, you know, we need to do some more compliance this summer. But the idea is like, so the new UPS store went in. They called us and they said, okay, we've got an area that's going to be storage. There's windows. Can we cover it? And based on the Windows code signed code that we did is, yes, you have to ask for an exception. And then this is why. But the idea is that the parts that are public, people like to see in. If you think about the places we have that you can't see in, you do not feel like you can just wander in. And so that's a lot of why they talk about that transparency, that visibility is as much as sometimes they think, oh, signage is good. If you have too much, people can't see in, they're actually might be less hesitant to go in. Weather protection, again, part of that is obviously if you're standing in the rain at their door, but also it has a better look for it. Building materials, reforms, idea of just creating a little bit more variety than just square boxes.
Okay. Any questions on building entrances, weather protection, building materials, roof forms?
And then the last one, it would only really take an effect is if we start getting multiple storied buildings. Is the idea that the higher you go, the more you have to step in. So your first floor would be at the street level, and then maybe your second floor, or at least by your third floor, you're moving in a few feet, so that if you go to Seattle, it's like skyscrapers. You just feel inundated. If you step back things, it helps people feel not quite so towered over. And then I thought the graphic was great because it just showed a lot of those things we're looking at. A reminder that, again, planning terms that get tossed around: articulation and modulation. Articulation is the idea of using architecture to divide up the mass. So it is like changing roof lines, doing materials, textures, you're adding balconies, you're adding belly bands, windows, doors. And then modulation is simply like, okay, for every 20 feet, you've got to go in or out 10 feet if you've got a huge building, so that you're not just this huge straight wall.
I
like you
love
do
this
for
intent.
warehouses.
But I've seen this expressed in some super tacky ways that are gonna, 10 years from now scream the time that they were built. Like different, there's a bump out and it's got a different siding and it's a slightly different color. The kind of like big mixed use I'm talking about? You see them everywhere. Anyway, we can avoid that would be great. I know you know what I'm talking
There are
about.
times when our plans do not work out right. So anyway, this is, I don't know, again, not sure how we want to, if we're like, yeah, these are great. If you want to think on it, come back in either next month or the month after and talk about them a little more after we've thought through them. If it's like, yeah, go with this, or we want some changes on this. So
Does everyone think?
I think this was really helpful
Yeah.
to talk through it. Having another month to go through it in more detail, I think, would be also helpful. Just a few general things. I think I'm pretty torn on a lot of things between letting them do what they want and imposing strict guidelines. So I think having time to think those through. The parking lot situation, I also go back and forth. If I'm on a bike, I would much rather have the building on the sidewalk. If I'm driving, I would much rather see how many open parking spots are in front of the building. But I think we should be careful to not say, oh, this strip of road or this area, no one walks here, so let's just let them put a big parking lot. Maybe if we create it to be more walkable, the people will come. Kind of a chicken or the egg situation. I would just say be mindful of that. But Meridian, some parts are far too gone. So
Any other just general thoughts or comments?
On page 19, just the photos of the hiding the trash cans and the recycling containers. Just noticing like the behind the entire Safeway complex, that's become such more of a through area to get to like grocery outlet over there instead of people going through the main parking lot. I see more and more cars going back that way, and just having a cleaner presentation back there, just as a not behind the building, but it is an actual like through passageway. But I mean, I've seen cars like having to go around piles of pallets just stacked there, and there was like a mattress back there one day. And so just having that clean presentation, I think, would just make it more inviting to be on that backside, because the library does have an entrance back there too. So it is not just a back building or shipping area. We are actually inviting people to drive down that way, to park down there, to leave their car. And the first thing they're seeing is all these like pallets and dumpsters and just things. So strong support of covering the mess.
I agree. There was some little bit of to do about that strip of road. It's not really a road, it's private. So they can block it off at any time they want. But I agree, this is probably the best opportunity to take advantage of that screening of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so I think tonight was a little bit more about business. And then we're thinking next time it'll be a little bit more about the residential side of things, or.
So yeah, I can bring back at the next meeting more like the multifamily stuff. So some of this is duplicate, some of it overlaps, but there are things that are specific for apartment complexes, multifamily townhouses, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So what are everyone's thoughts as far as the close a chapter, open a chapter, go back to it all at the end? Or do we want to just get into business, like stick with business next meeting until we feel like we have iterated and we're good with business and then move into multifamily? Or do we want to, like, okay, we talked about business, spend 5 minutes next meeting as far as, did anyone have any thoughts about last presentation that we missed? Okay, let's dive into multifamily. Granted, with all of it, whichever way we go, we're still going to have options to come back at the end and look at the total package. But I just want to figure out what people feel is the best way to parcel this out.
I like today having the opportunity to hear staff walk through it, and then we'll have a month and then spend a little time on it
Okay.
next month, just to go over anything we found and then move on and do something similar as tonight with the next section.
Okay. So next month, or next meeting would be, agenda item 6A is review of last. 6B would be moving into the next chapter.
Yeah, because like I said, some of this overlaps, like obviously dumpsters, you have to screen, so it'll be a smaller chunk that's
Okay.
just specifically why a multifamily that's different than this. So yeah, I can do the similar idea for that. And definitely what I'm hearing, maybe I'll just do a recap there, is, it sounds like obviously the screening, obviously making some creativity with some of these buildings. But definitely, is there a way that we can, for some of our existing areas, get them not massively, but at least a little bit better, whether that's access, whether that's screening? Because I mean, theoretically, yes, someone could come in and tear down all of the Safeway complex and build it all up, but I don't think that's going to happen, or the other side. And so is there ways that, I think, ways that we could say, okay, I'll look and see what can we do to encourage them to do some improvements just here and there to make it a little more
Yeah,
design
I
friendly.
could definitely see that happening with Buds, but not Safeway.
Yeah, that's a lot of property, and it stays full. So.
Yeah, because I'm like, Safeway is definitely, that whole complex is one that you would like to see revitalized as far as access, where it's like, if you guys are just going to be parking all of your trucks there, let's find a way to just say, like, that's not public parking, or screen it, or.
Okay.
But yeah, I just see people too many times cutting across from the Planet Fitness side, stopping at the median, and then waiting to clear. And then it's just kind of a death trap of walking along that landscape island there until you get to sidewalks. All right, cool. So it sounds like we've got a good plan for next meeting. All I ask is, please, if you have any comments and stuff like that, make sure to feel free to reach out to staff about them and kind of refresh yourself before our next meeting, because my only fear is I just don't want to get deep dive into this so much again that now we're spending another 40 minutes on business and we're going, hey, what did we discuss last time? Where did we start? So whatever we can do to make sure we're trying to continue the conversation, I would greatly appreciate
How
it.
do we prevent that?
I don't know, but I'm just going to ask for it.
Get to the universe and it'll happen.
Yeah, I'm just putting it out there that my goal would be that this can turn into a very tedious process if we allow it. And so if we can just make sure we're continuing the conversations and refreshing ourselves prior to next meeting, it would be greatly appreciated. I don't know if I'm allowed to bribe people with candies and treats or something, but if that's what.
But if it's in your chair, it's in your
Yeah,
chair.
but if I'm
Say it.
allowed to, cash. Not on the record, but that's just my big ask, is whatever we can do to make sure we're continuing conversations would be great from meeting to meeting. With that, we'll turn it to staff reports if I'm tracking correctly, right?
Just a reminder of all the activities. It is summertime. So we have Touch a Truck next Thursday. If you have any children or you yourself want to come see what the bucket truck looks like, or the fire engine, or the motorcycle, or whatever. So that's going on. We're going to have movie, or not movie. There is music in the park in 2 Wednesdays, I believe, to kind of our first
23rd.
attempt at the stage, get all of our stuff out before Milton Days. So I think there's 4 little half an hour mini groups that we were able to get.
Is that the 23rd?
Yes.
Very fun.
Yes. So, and I think there'll be a food truck there as well. What else? There is obviously the community yard sale and something else in July, but I can't remember what it is. And then obviously Milton Days coming up. So, and I was looking for volunteers for Milton Days if you're, And we will have a booth. The city always has a booth, and I will have one that's talking about some of what we're working on, just kind of, and then especially I think I had said I would like to focus on some of the like tree canopies, urban forestry, that kind of stuff. So if any planning commission members want to hang out for half an hour and talk to the people, you're welcome to. If you're already so volunteered, I understand. That's it.
Great. Commissioner reports, I probably should have covered this, or we should have officially added it to the agenda, but so August 13th, I heard some comments about, do we want to table that meeting, move it to September, pros and cons on that, or if we want to maybe table like October's meeting, or just whatever works. So what is staff's timeline as far as if we were to,
Staff is happy to.
yeah, staff is okay with a,
Staff's okay if you want to give me an extra month. Staff's also happy to keep things moving. So
okay. How is everyone feeling about an August meeting, or, so we can just power through and just keep all of our meetings. We can cancel August, we threw out October, but that was only because of the craft fair or bazaar. How are people feeling?
I have no strong preference.
Yeah, if staff is cool with powering through, I'll power through as well. Charge.
So keep going through August? Okay. Just want to make sure. Cool. Okay. Now officially we'll move into commissioner reports. And I'll start on this side of the room.
All right. Well, since I missed it last time, welcome, Commissioner Murray.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you. I don't have another report besides, please drive carefully during the summer. I was in an accident last week. I'm fine. The motorcyclist was not. So look out for motorcyclists. Look out for yourself. Please drive safe. That's it.
Yeah. Commissioner Murray.
Yeah. Happy second meeting. Just I'll be at Milton Days with Parks Board, and I'll just scoot the chair to the next table over. But yeah, and then volunteering in the morning. So just really looking forward to Milton Days overall. It's going to be a fun one. Hopefully the weather holds out for us. But if anything like last year, it's going to be a good turnout.
Yeah.
But nothing else.
Commissioner Zarro.
I've got nothing.
Commissioner Boyle.
Let's see, as brought up by staff, July 26th is the community garage sale. And I will have, apparently, or someone in my house is gonna have a bunch of junk to get rid of, because I'm on her about it. So, yeah, we're gonna get involved with that this year. We'll be one of the homes down here. Speaking of, I live about 150 yards from here. And somebody broke into my truck and tried to steal it about 3 weeks ago. And if I didn't have the, the aftermarket no start thing on it, it'd have been gone, because I put a screwdriver in, and with my little fob, it fired right up. So this is 150 yards from the police station. So these people are here. They're in our community. As a matter of fact, last night I was on my way home at 5 p.m., came across Porterway Bridge, and I saw a nice group of ne'er-do-wells, hobos, whatever, drug addicts, whatever you call them, crawling out from underneath the Porterway Bridge. So they're here. They are definitely here. I went to the police department. Police department's told me that without any regrets or anything, was we can't do anything. It's state property. Those people are allowed to stay there until the state makes them move. The state is not about relocating and anything like this. So they are telling me, well, they're coming from Fife and they're coming, I don't care where they're coming from. They're a danger to the safety of our children. And so I guess I suggested some vigilante type activities and they said, that's probably not a good idea. But there are people that can be contacted and badgered with emails with the state, with DOT and whatnot. So I guess I just go the squeaky wheel route and hope for the best. But I'm just telling people, protect your property and protect your families, and because nobody else is going to run these people out of here. They're here and nobody's going to run them out. So just my little bit of bandstanding here for my grief for my poor truck ignition, and that wasn't cheap.
As far as reports for me, I know she's not here, but I did want to say thank you to Commissioner Johnson for all of the work she's doing on just making sure that there's a lot of public transparency and opportunities to look at the mayoral election and our candidates. I don't know how much I can get into that on staff reports, but just that it's cool that there's stuff out there. You're encouraged to look that up. I think it's fun to hear of all the summer events, but along with that, yeah, summer's out and zombies are too, man. I've definitely seen them more and more, and that's one thing that as we push for more sidewalks, as my street got sidewalks, it was like, oh, that's what it means when you start getting sidewalks too. So there's pros and cons to sidewalks. Yeah, and especially with all of the big events in Seattle, that's where a lot of that's getting kind of pushed out into anywhere that's near public transit and such. But that's the area we live in. I don't have anything else. So next regular meeting, August 13th, we're holding strong. And with that, 7:17 meeting